I would like to bring back a series that I've been wanting to bring back for a while. Little series that I did back in 2021 called Kris Vents. And here, I'm gonna just kind of full screen my my face for the stream here. So,
all right.
So for this month, I opted to play a bunch of Metal Gear games, and so far it's going pretty well. I played Metal Gear, the PS2 port of the original MSX2 game. That video just premiered 2 days ago. I did a playthrough of Metal Gear, the NES port, which that video is going to be premiering on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yesterday, I recorded and uploaded a playthrough of Snake's Revenge for the NES, which is going to be premiering on Monday the 13th, I believe, at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, Snake's Revenge. For those of you who may not be familiar with Snake's Revenge, it is the standalone sequel to the NES port of Metal Gear 1. And both games were made completely without Hideo Kojima's oversight. Except Metal Gear on the NES, even though there's a lot of level design changes and the story is very, very compacted compared to the MSX2 version, is still a very solid, pun marginally intended, a very solid game. It's one that I recommend people check out at least once, especially if you have the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection that just came out. Snake's Revenge is a completely different story. So, a little behind the scenes on this, on my playthroughs. So, I use a lot of emulators for my gameplay. Obviously, I use save states for my gameplay. Usually that's just so I have a much smoother playthrough. That'll take less time. It takes less time just using an emulator versus fucking up and having to restart whole chunks of the game all over again, especially those old NES games, which pretty much fuck you over. Which would pretty much fuck you over and then tell you to get good.
Dicks.
But still, Metal Gear, the MSX version, and the NES version were still fairly balanced games. So my playthrough of Metal Gear on the MSX, the PS2 port of OG Metal Gear, came up to... It's an 85-minute video off of that was cut down from, by the time I finished recording that playthrough, it was roughly 2 hours and 58 minutes of footage to work with. Because sometimes I'll redo whole boss battles just so I make sure I can get that good take. My playthrough of Metal Gear on the NES, the final video, the raw footage came up to about 2.5 hours for me to work with, and I managed to cut that down to 77 minutes. Snake's Revenge is so cheap. The stealth mechanics which rely on the enemies don't see you unless you're standing exactly on their unless you are standing exactly eye level with them. So it's like if they're facing in your general direction and you're not standing behind cover, they're going to see you. And plus the enemy AI in that game is random, so you might think you've got a pattern marked down, but then you go up to stealth kill them and then boom, Next thing you know, the whole place goes to red alert so fast there's actually a guard lodged inside your duodenum before you can even utter the phrase, "Kept you waiting, huh?" A stealth mechanic that's touchier than a pizza party on Epstein Island.
Damn it, Kris! Are you trying to kill me?
Probably.
I reckon you fucking are.
Between that, an insane, almost vertical difficulty spike constantly screwing you over, and from how many fuck-ups I had to deal with, however many times I had to repeat boss battles, however many times I had to load a save state because of suddenly being discovered by the randomized AI. Guess how long my raw footage for Snake's Revenge wound up being?
What?
So, the final video was an hour and 43 minutes long. The raw footage, before I started editing it all down, was just a hair over 6 hours.
Jesus Christ, dude.
6 hours. And that's without even going in, and just the fucking difficulty in the randomized AI is nothing compared to the foobar fucking... The game is so fucked up it actually has two different narratives. So back then, when Japanese games would get translated over in the West, usually the localization was handled without the original developer's oversight. So the Western localizers could just make up whatever bullshit narrative they wanted for the game, and us filthy round eyes would have been none the wiser. And Konami was notorious for this practice back in the 8-bit era. Metal Gear suffered from this, and Snake's Revenge suffered from it as well. If you go by the in-game story for Metal Gear, your main enemy, the Commander of Outer Heaven, the man who wishes to destroy the world with Metal Gear, is Big Boss. Is your Foxhound Commander Big Boss. Even though, thanks to series canon that via Metal Gear Solid 5, we now know that was not the real Big Boss. It's actually Venom Snake, the Big Boss double that you play as in Metal Gear Solid 5. If you go by the in-game story, it's Big Boss that you're fighting. If you go by the game's instruction manual, not only is a not Big Boss, because Big Boss is actually, in the instruction manual, is referred to as Commander South for whatever fucking reason. But the Commander of Outer... But as per the instruction manual, the Commander of Outer Heaven is a guy named Colonel Vermin Katafi. As opposed to Muammar Gaddafi, I guess.
Oh, okay. Damn.
And Snake's Revenge also has the same bullshit in it. If you go by the in-game story, your main enemy is Big Boss, who has apparently been resurrected as a Terminator that looks suspiciously like RoboCop.
Wow.
If you go by the game's instruction manual, not only is Metal Gear never mentioned, even though the game ends with you blowing up a Metal Gear, there's some kind of super weapon mentioned, but it's definitely not referred to in the manual as Metal Gear. If you go by Snake's Revenge's instruction manual, your villain is a guy named Hyarola Kakamami.
Serious?
I could not make this bullshit up if I sat down and tried, man.
My good lord.
To steal a quote from Play It Bogart, this is the equivalent of opening your copy of Splinter Cell Chaos Theory and finding the manual for Sneak King. Yeah, you remember Sneak King, that weird-ass stealth game on the 360 where you literally played as the Burger King?
Dude, don't even get me started on that shit. Just, bruh. This whole situation also makes me think of a few years ago when I tried playing Metal Gear Survive. Good lord, that game was awful.
Yeah, I haven't even tried to play it, and I just the very concept alone just does nothing for me.
Yeah, it's some bullshit.
But like Metal Gear Survive, which was made after Kojima had departed from Konami, both the NES port of Metal Gear and Snake's Revenge were done completely without Kojima's oversight. Now, because of a lot of changes that were made to the NES version of Metal Gear, Kojima wound up disowning it. He referred to it as utter garbage, which I don't necessarily agree with. Obviously, the MSX2 version is the superior version. Both versions of the game are on the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection, as is Snake's Revenge, although I recommend just ignoring that and playing Metal Gear 2 instead.
Yeah. No shit.
Snake's Revenge wound up going over so poorly that Kojima was asked by a Konami executive to come back and make a proper sequel to Metal Gear, which is how we got Metal Gear 2, and that, of course, led to Metal Gear Solid, and however many sequels and spin-offs came from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure when you watch my playthrough of Snake's Revenge, when it premieres next week, you might look at it and think, okay, it doesn't seem that bad. It seems like a Metal Gear game. No. Just...
No.
And it's like they didn't even really improve on some of the issues that were in the first Metal Gear. Like there's in the original Metal Gear, and this is a thing in both the MSX version and the NES version, switching key cards to open specific doors. It's a very tedious process when you're trying to figure out, okay, does this card work with the door? Does this card work with the door? And you're trying to make sure which card works with what door before an enemy turns the corner and suddenly you've got 5 guards up your ass. It's an exceptionally tedious process. And it especially doesn't help when they brought back... Not only did they bring back the pits from the NES version, but there's a trick to... In the NES version, when you can open up a menu, and as a pit is opening, and it'll stop the pit in its tracks. So even though it's still there and it doesn't show up when you go back to the main screen, you can still... Yeah. It's not opening up anymore, so you can just go on your merry way. Not only do they bring those back, but the menu trick doesn't work. Or at least by the time you see it opening up, the pits open up so fast that your reaction time is basically has to be godlike, and good fucking luck with that.
Like playing the boulder section on Resident Evil 4's professional mode.
Yeah, good luck. Good fucking luck with that.
Good fucking luck.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but we gotta start wrapping this up because I got stuff to do tonight for my birthday.
Yeah, so I'm going to just leave you off with this. If you want to know what happens in Snake's Revenge, just read the synopsis on Wikipedia. If you want to play Snake's Revenge, don't. Just play Metal Gear 2. It's a much better game, and it's a much better sequel, and it's actually made by the guy who created Metal Gear in the first place. In the immortal words of Play Bogart, Snake's Revenge makes me want to grind up and snort a copy of Wall Street Kid.
Damn, that was oddly specific.
So, yeah. I just had to get that out of my system. The one good thing about replaying Snake's Revenge is that I never have to play it again because it's not canon with the rest of the goddamn series.